Okay, so everybody get the gist of the contract? Any questions on that? You saw the research behind it? That's the economist in me, scientist, trying to show you that even though you think you can multitask, there's been pretty extensive research that says you can't. So that's what I've been doing the last few years, and then it's especially important, I think, in this Zoom environment that we have an understanding of how the classroom should work with other people online. And so tonight I wanted to see how it worked with everybody having a different device and you being able to see other faces. So who do we have remotely? It's just technically one? No, and Keith. So we got 2 remote? Okay. All right, so I was somewhat distracted last week, so I want to go through and do attendance again, because I usually do a little bit more notes to myself, which I didn't do last time. Trying to get some of this stuff set up. So I will this week, if I can find a pen. Who's got an extra pen for me? Thank you. Was it extra or?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give your last name, and you give me how you want to be called. So you tell me your first name, short name, or whatever, however you want to be addressed. So Alam, Mohammed. Okay. Dagarimba. The Tegari, did I miss a couple of consonants there? Sounds like it.
I practice a lot.
Keith is fine.
Keith is fine. Okay, thank you, Keith. Oh boy, 2 challenges right in a row. Dolezalova.
Yeah, that's
Is that pretty close?
Yeah.
I thought it was all right.
Erica.
Erica, okay.
Thank you.
And Fagan. Clay. And Johnston.
Lindsay's fine.
Lindsay's fine. And McGonigal. McGonigal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's easy. Okay. And go by
Brendan.
Brendan. Okay. Spezard. Spezard. Okay.
It's Leanne.
Leanne. Willett.
Lizzie.
Lizzie. And Williams. Shanita. Okay, good. So all present and accounted for. Okay, so what I wanted to do tonight was open up for questions on the homework. So which ones of the ones you had due for tonight would you like to discuss?
The second one.
The second one. Okay, let me. So those of you who are remote, I'm going to pull up or attempt to pull up. See how this works. I'm going to attempt to screen share on this thing. Let's see, Managerial Economics, Pro. Screen share. Let's see, I think I'll just do screen only. Okay. Which one? So what I'm going to do is just kind of put up the, if I can see this thing, my only challenge here is trying to, which one? Chat.
We didn't have to do the whole.
Can we just run through all of them?
No.
No.
I'll just take them case by case.
Okay.
But you can, I mean, I'll show you the questions, and if you, just to kind of remember if you had a specific question about them, then feel free. I'll do all of them if I had to, but I don't want to just sit here and plow through them. So I want to respond to what you thought was important rather than me just plowing through them. So let's start with 2.6 here. So we've got I might have to work a little bit here on. Are you guys able to see that remotely okay? Okay. So we got 2 surgeries, and I've got my people in the way. Oh, I guess I can see it from here. Okay, so that you can see it there. All right. So 2 surgeries, breast reconstruction and breast augmentation, have different prices. Breast augmentation is cosmetic surgery not covered by health insurance. Patients who want the surgery must pay for it themselves. Breast reconstruction following breast removal due to cancer is covered by insurance. The price of one of the surgeries has increased by about 10% a year since 1995, and while the others increased by 2% a year. Which of the surgeries has a lower inflation rate and why? So here is the suggested answer from the book, which you guys, I see this could be a problem here. If I can maybe move this one a little bit. There we go. So market pressure comes from 2 sources: consumers who choose not to purchase and competitors. Breast augmentation is subject to both of these. Oh, it didn't move up there. Oh, that's interesting. It moved on this screen. Oh, I see. I got to move it here. That's right. Each user is unique. There we go. Okay, got it. And now we still. Okay, let's see. How can I? So screen sizing, I see, is an issue. All right. Well, let's work with it here. Get the gist of it. Maybe I can do this. Didn't quite get there. All right. So discussion. What'd you guys put? What'd you think about with this problem?
I put the wrong answer.
Okay. Why?
And I think I went at it at a different angle. What I thought was that since the breast augmentation was not covered, I went at it that it would be something more that maybe more privileged people would purchase.
Okay.
Versus the other one not covered by insurance.
Okay.
So I thought that it would raise higher. People could still probably purchase that, while insurance could get those who maybe had lower. And
all right.
therefore, if it was flipped, I thought maybe they would lose one of those more.
So I like your gut instinct. For one thing, you're touching on one of the important things that demand is that all of the things constant. If there is, and we haven't gotten to demand and supply, so don't freak out here, but if a breast surgery costs $5,000, and we look at the market for the quantity of breast surgeries being done over some time frames, 100, right? So we got at $5,000, there's 100 breast surgeries being done. If there is higher incomes, holding all other things constant, an increase in income would cause upward pressure on the price. So your gut is good there on that particular aspect. Okay, other comments on this one? Yeah?
Well, I was originally confused because it talks about which one is paid for insurance and which one is not, and then it says the price for one of these surgeries has increased by 10%. So it really doesn't tell you which surgery
Right.
is 10%.
Right, that was intentional, yeah.
And so I finally came to the conclusion that the surgery that increases by 2% each year has a lower inflation rate because it is the surgery that is not covered by insurance, because that creates more.
Okay, which is what they're suggesting here, right? Is that we've seen less. And so, did you agree with this answer, or what reasons did you give for it?
Well, I had with the surgery, insurance does not pay for. Consumers will bargain for a lower price, in turn making the inflation rate lower year.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that's kind of what this is picking up. So we've got 2 things going on for competitive pressures: competition on the buying side, competition on the selling side, right? So if all of a sudden there's what seems to be large profit margins going on in that type of surgery, then you're going to have an increase in the supply of doctors willing to supply that surgery relative to other things they could be doing with their medical degree, right? So their doctors sit there and choose, like, oh, should I do breast? Should I do colons? I don't know. They're making these decisions at the margin. one of the factors they think about is where the market's at currently with that. And so an increase in supply puts downward or upward pressure on the price. An increase in the supply of doctors supplying that procedure. Price goes down, right? So here, this is what the golf club's all about. We see that if there's an increase in the supply of doctors, that would tend to cause the equilibrium price to fall, right? So we've got that competitive force going on on the supply side. And then as you pointed out on the consumer side, if consumers are actually paying for it, they tend to be more aggressive. They tend to shop around, right? If you have insurance covering it, you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like today, I'll give you an example. It just happened yesterday. That big wind that came through, did you guys feel the wind the other night? Well, it took a branch down and crushed my electrical line, and I was out of power from 11 o'clock. What was that, Monday night then? Yeah, Monday night. And then Tuesday, I had to call in an electrician. And normally if I'm doing, getting bids for construction type work, I would get 3 bids for it, right? But in my case, I had a $1,000 deductible, and I kind of estimated from experience that my payment, the total bill for this work that was going to be done was going to exceed $1,000. And so did I have any personal incentive to seek out the lowest bid, the lowest electrician, and go shopping? No. Right? I had no incentive whatsoever because my insurance, I'm going to pay $1,000 regardless of who does it. So I picked up the phone. I was thinking about getting some bids, by the way, but I picked up the phone and an electric company said, we can be there. One guy comes at 7:30 a.m. the next morning. They were there, 2 guys ready to do work. And they just kind of started doing it. And I said, well, do you got an estimate for that? Oh, my boss does that. And you know, I basically didn't even get an answer on what this was going to run me. But in a situation like that where you've got emergencies and other factors going on, you just don't always do it that way. And so we have to think about what's going on the buyer side as well as the seller side. So when insurance gets involved, so often the consumers don't really care about the price. And that's certainly a large factor in the escalating medical costs that we're seeing in the United States, for sure, is the large role that health insurance plays with it and how it disconnects the consumer from the pricing that's going on. Okay, good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does moral hazard play a role at all?
Moral hazard. What we're going to learn about moral hazard in chapter 20. So tell me what you know about moral hazard.
Well, I was just thinking with regards to the insurance companies, they may not want to make, say, breast augmentation cheaper because people are going to tend to do the procedure whether they need it or not.
Yes.
And so I was just wondering how that plays into the pricing with that in mind.
Yeah, so that's right. Whenever we get, so moral hazard again is a topic we're going to cover later, but people tend to behave differently once they're under contract. And so once you have that insurance contract, you might drive a little more recklessly. So I don't want to jump the boat too much, but yes, that's right. That's certainly a part of the insurance game. Moral hazard and adverse selection are the 2 key things that we'll talk about when we get to those chapters down the road. So yes, good point. Okay, other things with this one.
So how does it, there's no way for like insurance to go back and like argue those prices with them or say like we won't cover this, like if it really was really like an 8% difference on surgery,
Yeah.
would you think the insurance company would go back and say like, I'm sorry, I can't use this doctor, he's too expensive?
Yes, and that does go on to some degree. So without jumping the gun too much, when we'll talk more about this when we get to insurance, is that insurance companies tend to set up exclusive deals with doctors and hospitals. So like for Ottawa, Ransom Memorial Hospital has kind of an exclusive deal. They're one of the doctors that are in network. And so to you, you got to give me a deal. And so they do kind of beat them up on price that way. But the moral hazard question that Keith was referring to comes into more like, how much healthcare should I consume? We tend to consume more healthcare when we're under that insurance situation than we would otherwise. So if we are uninsured, we might wait till we're almost on our deathbed before we go to see the doctor, right? If it's going to cost an actual money out of my pocket, I'm going to have to pay the $100 office visit rather than a $15 copay, then we think long and hard before we actually go to the office visit. And so that's what that moral hazard element is on the consumer side. Okay, other questions or comments?
Could you please explain again, because I kind of missed the part when you were explaining the consumer side and the supplier side, how
on the supply side, you have doctors that are going to want to enter the market if there's profits to be made there. So the supply side is going to keep profits more in check because of competition. On the consumer side, because the consumers are more separated from the actual price of the procedure, they're going to tend to not care, they're not going to shop around, and therefore that keeps prices going up. That kind of keeps prices out of check. Okay? All right, other questions besides this one? Chapter 2, let's just try to stick to chapter 2. Any other ones on this chapter that, there's the questions.
We only had to answer the ones you emailed us, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's more here than what, yes. This is the full answer sheet. Okay, how about chapter 3?
I think 3-1.
3-1. All right, concert opportunity cost. We kind of talked about this one, another thing, didn't we? Try to move this guy back down here. All right, so you want a free Bruce Springsteen concert, assume that the ticket has no resale value. U2 has a concert same night, and this represents your next best alternative. Tickets to the U2 concert cost $80, and on any particular day, you'd be willing to pay up to $100 to see this band. Assume that there are no additional costs to seeing either show. Based on the information presented here, what is the opportunity cost of seeing the Bruce Springsteen concert? Okay, what do you guys think? $20. $20. How'd you get that?
Well, I got a free ticket. If I value the other ticket at $100, but I have the opportunity to get it for $80, then essentially giving up the $20 that I would save.
That you would have gotten.
That ticket at $100.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. It's calculated because you have a free ticket to U2, your opportunity cost will be $100, but you must subtract the cost of the ticket, $80 or something, the total opportunity cost is $100.
Okay. All right. Let's see, what one was that? 3-1. Let's see what the answer key brought up here. $20. Opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative. So yeah. Any questions on that one? We're going to talk about that. Go ahead, Keith.
Because I got it wrong.
Okay.
Because I thought the opportunity cost would have been 0. And the reason I thought that was I got a free ticket to watch the Bruce Springsteen concert. And well, at least maybe what I got wrong was my understanding of what opportunity cost is. Because the way I understood it was if I money opportunity cost of spending on product A is like the quantity of product B that I would get for the same amount.
So the thing that you got to key into is like what this answer key is saying right here with the value. So your value for this alternative. So how much value do you place on the thing that you're giving up? So that is the additional benefit. But because it costs you $80 to go, you're actually just giving up the 20, right?
See, I thought that value was irrelevant because it was over. I mean, it was already more than what the ticket cost. I mean, if it's $80, I just think that mattered what you would have paid.
Okay. Well, and we'll talk more about that next chapter, but you want to think about, do you always get exactly the same value as what you pay? Or do sometimes you feel like you get a deal? And that's the key part to the whole demand curve concept, is that if we go back to this, the last person who bought the breast surgery valued it at $5,000, but someone out there valued it at $7,000. And so to them, the $5,000 price was a deal. The value that they placed on it was $7,000, and they only had to pay $5,000. And so value is subjective, right? So value is subjective across the spectrum. And so what we want to be thinking about is what we're giving up on a personal decision basis of what we're giving up in value versus what we have to pay to get that. Because we got the ticket free on the first one, the cost was nothing. This kind of ties into the same discussion we had in class where if we had if we already paid for the ticket and it's non-refundable, we got to kind of forget about the sunk cost that the ticket was and just kind of look at, well, what's the value moving forward? Okay? Anything else on that one? All right. Other homework questions?
Can I ask a related question to that?
Yep.
What's the relationship between the value I place on something and my ability to actually pay that much for it?
The value that you place on it and your ability to buy it. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
So I might put a lot of value on, trying to think of something, a Lamborghini. Right? I value a Lamborghini, but I don't have the $200,000 to pay for it. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, so I guess, how would you pick the number that you would pay for this Lamborghini?
Right. So the old saying that goes with buying is you need to find a willing and able buyer. Willing and able. There's kind of two parts to the buying process. And so that's the able part, is that you've got the budget to be able to purchase the item too. Because if you don't have that, you can't do it. So you're kind of out of the market at that point if you don't have the ability to make the transaction happen, if you don't have the funds for it. Okay? So yeah, it's hard. This is one of the more difficult things of economics, is to try to separate out what's the benefit and what's the cost. Because so many times in our heads when we go shopping, we kind of equate the two. We're like, oh, well, that only costs $5 and I'll buy it. And so we kind of start to forget about that. That implicitly means that you value it higher than $5. Maybe you value it right at $5, but maybe you value it at something higher. So kind of trying to separate out the benefits and the costs. And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight too with the upcoming stuff. Okay? Anything else on this set of questions?
We're going to talk about 3-5.
3-5, Starbucks.
I guess I just don't really understand, like I feel like I understand hidden costs, but, like not, yeah.
All right, so let me read the question. I can't remember all these here. So there could be many hidden costs here. Here are a few examples. Oh wait, this is the answer, isn't it? I'm guessing. Didn't seem like a question. There it is. Starbucks is hoping to make use of excess restaurant capacity in the evenings by experimenting with selling beer and wine. It speculates that the only additional cost are hiring more of the same sort of workers to cover additional hours and cost of new line of beverages. What hidden costs might emerge? All right, so what hidden costs did you guys come up with?
Liquor license.
Liquor license, okay. Now, on the liquor license, let me go to that one. Is there an additional cost associated with a liquor license for this action? So Starbucks is hoping to make, yes, use of excess restaurant space by experimenting with selling beer and wine. Is that an additional cost associated with this decision? Yes or no? Yes, that's right. So that would be an additional cost. Like if we decide to sell beer, wine, yes, we need to investigate into the liquor license and dram shop insurance. There's some other things that go along with selling alcohol. So good. Okay, what else?
And like security costs.
Okay, security, good. So if we start selling booze and people start getting drunk, it might get a little rowdy. Maybe we have to all of a sudden hire a bruiser to bounce at the end of the night.
The decision to buy whether to sell bottled beer or beer on tap.
Okay.
Because if you're going to sell beer on tap, you're going to have the keg system and everything there. So.
Okay, so yeah, there might be some hidden costs depending on our delivery system. Maybe there's some fixed cost up front if we go with a tap and a keg. Maybe we have to change our countertop and add some infrastructure. If it's bottles, maybe it's just a new case to store the bottles in. But we didn't think about the case. We just thought about selling the beer. We didn't think about the refrigerator that needs to be put in. Good.
I said something like that. I said storage. Starbucks is too small. So
Yeah.
Too small space to store all the extra, you got to keep them cold.
The extra product that might go along with it. Yep.
More stuff.
Okay, good. Anything else?
So
I
There you
said,
go. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
I said that they may have to, put some money aside for potential renovation if there are any damages, because drinking alcohol may increase the risk of,
Okay.
say, people be vandalizing and stuff like that, in which case they'll need to renovate.
Good. So there might be some cost on the front end with modifying the countertop with the keg. There might be costs on the back end after people puke and break things in our place. Good.
Would it cost be, could it be like, well, okay, if we're gonna do this place is gonna be pretty boring, maybe we need to add like different things that people would do, when they were.
With nightlife.
Right.
Oh, get a foosball table and some
Yeah.
a dartboard and stuff like
would
that.
count? I'm just
Maybe.
curious.
Could be. Sure.
the other thing that I had written down that so that they should consider the cost of lost coffee revenue during those times.
Good. Yeah, that's probably a good one too. Yeah, if there's, are we cannibalizing on ourselves to some degree, right? So if you come in, beer, coffee, maybe I want both, but yeah, I buy one, I'm not buying the other. So that's called cannibalizing some of your own product. So yeah, that could be a hidden cost. Good.
I put it all like kind of together and said like those are all relevant costs that are like coming with it, but then I included like interest that they would like charge for the capital.
Okay.
They might need some like capital.
So there could be some implicit costs associated with the capital needed to do all the upfront costs. Okay, good. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
A lot of places that sell alcohol like to have a scanner to scan the IDs. I mean, some places just look at them, but like nowadays with the ability to make fakes, they like to have a special scanner, so that would be an additional cost as well, because I don't think those are very cheap.
For checking out the IDs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, there could be some other processing. You might be subject and likely subject to some more rules and regulations that you weren't thinking about, right? And once you're serving alcohol and like processing IDs, maybe some other things that might come along. Good. All right, so main point here is, yeah, to kind of think about things that might not be so obvious when we first get that first aha moment. Oh yeah, let's start selling booze. We can make some money. So here's some of the things that was on the answer key. If I can get this thing. Wish I could bring this over to the left. Maybe I can. Ooh, I can. Okay.
Could you say that a hidden cost is a cost that may or may not come up? Because when I think about like liquor license, obviously we have to buy that.
Right.
I don't really see that as hidden.
Right.
You may not
That's right. Yeah, I think, yes, thinking about some uncertainty with some of those costs, the idea would be you should, through some due diligence, be able to figure out all the explicit costs. And then to think like an economist, you think about maybe some of that lost interest that you might have on the capital, the uncertain events. How do we value the cost of a broken sink from a drunk one night? You know, some of those sorts of things would be a little bit more of an art. But yeah, you definitely want to hammer out all the accounting costs and start taking kind of the next level from the step of, oh yeah, let's sell some booze, to, all right, let's start really thinking about what this is going to cost. So, good. All right. Other questions on the homework that you want to look over?
I would like to look at
3-2. Okay, you were able to purchase 2 tickets to an upcoming concert for $100 a piece when the concert was first announced 3 months ago. Recently saw that StubHub was listing a similar seat for $225. What does it cost you to attend the concert? What did you guys put for this one?
$225 a piece.
$225? Okay. Anybody else?
I put 200
200. Why do you say that?
because I say that, well, I didn't think that the new price changed anything with regards to how much I paid for the tickets.
Okay.
So what I paid was $200 for 2 tickets, and whether they change the prices in the future didn't really alter how much I paid for my ticket.
Okay. So it's still the $225.
I put that as well because I didn't know that I would be able to sell my ticket for that or gain anything. Like, I don't know, are they selling them for $225? People probably sell these tickets for $225.
Right. Yeah. There's some sort of market that's probably establishing that $225 is a fair price or whatever, if you will. There's somebody willing to buy in a voluntary setting, right? So here's what they had for the answer key. Get that out of the way. So what you paid 3 months ago is irrelevant, so that sounds good. The decision you're facing to attend the concert or not, if you do not attend, you can sell the tickets for $225, ignoring any brokering fees or hassle costs. Thus, you forego $450 to attend the concert, the price of 2 tickets. They've kind of changed the laws on that. Let me see if I can fit to a window.
Bail is considered.
Right, some unexpected costs like that. I think some other things you could add into this would be you've got the $225 to go, but you've also got whatever you're giving up to go to the concert, right? You've got the opportunity cost of other alternatives. So if you decide to go, you're giving up $450 worth of cash, and then maybe there's some non-monetary costs that could be tacked onto that as well. All right, other questions on this? All right, hearing none. So that'll be kind of the process I like to do. So if you guys have questions through the week, obviously you're always welcome to contact each other and see what the heck you thought about this problem. But I want you to kind of put in your own brain power into the problems. We can come in and we can kind of talk about them. And I think some of you asked how it was going to be graded. If I see that you put some good brain power into it and justified your answer, it's not so much a right or wrong type of thing. There is some gray area, but you might lose a few points if you didn't get quite the right concept going. But that's okay. It's not going to kill your grade. So what I really want you to do is to be able to really push yourself on the thoughts and the concepts that were going on with the economic way of thinking. That's the important part. Especially for homework. Go for it.
So when you buy, say you buy say, okay, in this example of the ticket, you buy a ticket today, and then they're asking you what the cost is in 3 months' time. What you pay doesn't really matter anymore, and it's what it costs at the time that the concert is held. That's the price that. We're imagining ourselves selling the tickets at that point, so that's what's throwing me off.
So yeah, the cost is what it cost you at that time. So you're giving up. We know at the time you're making the decision that you're giving up $450 worth of other opportunities, right? So that's where the money kind of helps clarify things, because we know for sure that you're at least giving up $450 worth of other things you could be doing. So when we think about opportunity cost, the equation that I like to consider is this. Your opportunity cost of an activity is equal to some monetary cost plus non-monetary cost. Because maybe what you're giving up is some time with your kid. How do you put a value on that? Well, an economist would claim you can put a value on it, just try it. You can price that. You can price that. Trust me, you can price that. If you really put it to it of how much it's worth it to you to give it up, everybody might have a different answer under different circumstances, and your answer tonight might be different than your answer next week, right? If my son is in the emergency room right now, I'm not here, right? The value of missing out time with him when he's having an emergency surgery right now at the emergency room is much different than the 3 hours I spend with you on a Wednesday when he's at home playing video games. That value changes from time to time. So I would claim that we can put a value on. That doesn't mean that value is always going to be consistent every time either. So that value is subjective. Value is subjective. And so what we can observe in the real world is what people are willing to pay, not necessarily knowing what they value at it. And so when we get to the pricing chapter, that's kind of important, because if you price something at $20 and you sell 100 units, once you guys go out and start your own business someday, you'll start wondering, could I have gotten 25? Would I have lost that many customers had I sold it at 25? Right? And so you start questioning, well, what is people's value of this? And now all of a sudden it becomes more important, because it's your bottom line that you're looking to consider in all the efforts that you put into running that business. And so then you start thinking of ways that you can, not to sound too devilish, but extract that value from them. Because the economist looks at it and says, well, if you're willing to pay 25 and you paid 25, did you get screwed? No. If you were willing to pay 25 and you only paid 20, you got a deal. But if you were willing to pay 25 and you paid 25, that was a deal too. I mean, that was fine. It was, no big deal. So that's what we'll be looking at there. So monetary costs, another way to kind of characterize this equation is to think of these as being explicit costs. Monetary costs are explicit costs. An economist specializes also in implicit costs. This is what distinguishes us from the accountant, is that we've got explicit costs and implicit costs. Okay, any other questions on the homework? All right, well, let's let's look on to, let's see, stop share. Get back to the Brady Bunch head here. Let's see what we got in store for chapter 4 and 5 tonight. Alright, let's see. I'm going to get my Zoom window. So I switched this. I hope this will work out smoothly for everybody. We'll see if it does. Oops. Okay, share screen. Guess I'll share screen with computer sound. Not sure if I need to do that or not. Oh, I get it. Okay, so now I can do that. All right. You guys remotely, can you see that? Keith, I can see your face. Can you see that screen?
I can still see the housing bubble and opportunity cost stuff.
Oh yeah. I guess this is my double check, isn't it? Oh, that's weird. Let's see.
Is that the screen you would like for me to see?
No. So let me stop share. Okay, we got that. Share screen. There we go. Now I get to pick the screen I want. Okay, share screen with computer sound. There. How's that? I guess if you guys are, if we're watching it here, what they're seeing is what we got. Okay. So, let's see how this thing works. So we're going to look at cost today. Oh, you guys all get a point. Disruption. Trying to set up all this equipment. Let's see, everybody's here today, huh? Everybody gets an extra credit point. This is where you go, yay! That's how that works. All right. So, plus Rust busted. Yeah, so you guys are just going to keep calling. I'm going to quickly try to silence this thing here. All right, now she's on. Okay, so how do you calculate an average cost? Average cost.
Well, you take units and quantity and
Okay, so it has something to do with quantity. What'd you do? Erica gave one of these, so you kind of do this with it, and all of a sudden it becomes an average cost.
that's how managers tell employees. You know? The magic. Well, you subtract it. I mean, you divide it by each other.
Divide it. Okay, divide what by what?
So it's the total cost divided by the
Okay, good. So total cost divided by the number of units. So our average total cost. Now we're using like average cost sometimes in the textbook, but let's say average total cost is equal to your total cost divided by the number of units you produce. So if you produce 100 units and you've got $30,000 worth of cost, so in your production, your total cost is $30,000 and you've got 100 units, what is our average total cost? $. Got those two zeros. So we got $300 per unit, right? So imagine whatever the production process is, we've got the total cost, and we just take whatever we produced and we divide it through. That, of course, gets a lot more complex when we have a multi-product company. Oh, what's the total cost? Well, it depends on what units we're talking about. But in the most simplest form here, where we've got a single product company, we take one divided by the other. All right, so that's how we calculate average cost. how does that differ with marginal cost? So economists like to do things at the margin.
Your marginal cost is your additional cost for producing and selling one more unit.
All right, so we're going to look at the incremental cost of an extra unit, right? The incremental cost of an extra unit. So this chapter especially is going to teach us this economic principle of dealing with things at the margin. So should I do something, should I not, is the extent decision, is what the author calls an extent decision. Should I do it, should I not? Well, let's look at all of the costs associated with that decision. Let's look at all the benefits with that decision. If the costs are greater than the benefit, don't do it. If the benefits exceed the cost, do it. It almost sounds stupid when we lay it out like that, doesn't it? But I can tell you that this goes on day after day with business in the real world, that people don't know how to think that way. They don't know how to separate themselves from average cost. It's very common for managers and owners of businesses to get wrapped up with, well, what did the insurance cost? Well, the building rent's $800. Where do you got that factored in, right? It doesn't matter in certain cases, unless are we going to open up a new shop on Main Street when we're currently at the south end of Ottawa? Well, now all of a sudden rent is a marginal cost, right? The $800 a month worth of rent is something that needs to be factored in the decision of should we open, should we not. But now once we decided to open, if the benefits exceeded the cost to do that, and we're opening up a shop on Main Street, once we're open, and we're trying to decide, well, should we stay open from till 5 p.m. or should we stay open till 7 p.m.? Now all of a sudden the cost of the rent has nothing to do with it, right? I've already committed to the contract. I'm sitting on Main Street, Ottawa. Now it's simply what is the marginal cost of staying open a couple extra hours? I've got a couple extra people, my utility, my lights are on, whatever the marginal costs are of that decision, and what's the benefit? If I'm running a retail shop, I'm hoping that I'm going to attract a few more customers. So how much more stuff am I going to sell in that extra 2 hours relative to the cost that it runs me? If I expect that I'm going to have a few more sales that exceed the cost, do it. If not, don't. And more likely, you open up for a couple hours and you kind of learn that this isn't working out, and then you go back to closing at 5. And so it's always kind of working your way through thinking about the marginal cost and the marginal benefit. All right, any questions or comments there?
So what's the formula for marginal cost?
Marginal cost formula, good question. So for the marginal cost, it is the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. Now that formula is a little bit different than what we have verbalized here, right? So the marginal cost is the additional cost incurred by producing and selling one more unit. So how does that work with that? Well, if you have to put on your schedule goggles and the table of numbers says that your costs go up by $30,000. So here's your total cost, here's your quantity, and I go up from 0 to 10 to 20 units, and my total cost at 0, I still have $100,000 worth of cost, and then with 10 units, it goes up to $160,000, and then at 20 units, my total cost goes up to $190,000. So what's my fixed cost associated with this? $100,000. So remember that our total costs are broke down into total variable cost plus total fixed cost. Fixed costs and variable costs are distinguished how?
Variable costs are affected by the number of units you produce.
By the number of units you produce, that's right. So that is our defining characteristic for variable costs and fixed costs. If I produce another unit, I'm going to incur more variable costs, but my fixed costs stay fixed over that time period that we're studying. And so if you see a table like this, you know that this is the fixed cost because I'm only producing 0. I'm not producing anything, and I'm still incurring a cost of $100,000. So back to my marginal cost formula here. What is the cost of the 20th unit? The additional cost incurred by selling one more unit. How about the 20th unit, just for fun? How would you calculate that?
Would it be
90 divided by 20?
Oh, no. Well, just, I don't know.
Okay, anybody else? 30 divided by 20. Well, how'd you get that?
To go from 10 to 20, the cost increased by 30, right?
Okay, so going from here to here, we incurred cost of 30,000.
So 30,000 divided by 20.
30,000, yep, divided by 20 units. Dangerously close, but not right.
I've taken this as I gotta find out my total cost of producing 19 of them. We add one more.
Yeah, and so that's the tough part. We don't have that data point, do we?
Am I onto it?
You're onto the right, yeah, you're onto the right thought. Yeah, if I had the 19th, like if I had 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then 19, that would be kind of helpful, yes. So we don't have it, so live with it. What do we do? Muhammad's not too far off. Just made one little misstep. So tell me the story again.
So it's not, is it 60,000, not 30,000, because you have to have the 30 from, or the 60,000 from the 100 to this 160.
Somebody verbalize this for me of what went on from this production point where we were producing 10 units and the cost was 160. Now we're producing 20 units and the total cost is 190. So verbalize that. Put that into a sentence for me.
You can figure out variable costs.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to go there. Just verbalize that for me. Clay, you got something?
You produced 10 more.
Okay, you produced 10 more, and what happened to your cost? It went down?
I mean, you have
The
more
price
costs,
of
but
producing the next one continually goes down, it decreases.
Did total cost decrease? No, total cost went up. So you guys you're dangerously close. And so now I'd say combine Muhammad's thought with Clay's thought, and you guys almost have an answer. So what did you say? You said something that was good. Do you remember? Pressure's on.
By 10?
What's that?
It's gonna be 10 instead of 20?
It's going to be 10 instead of 20. Why?
Well, because we only
10
have 10
more.
units.
Because it's only 10 more units, right? That extra 10 units generated $30,000 worth of cost. So even though we're lacking information on having the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and there is more data there, let's work with what we got. What we do know is that we bumped up production by 10 units, and that generated an extra $30,000 worth of cost. So if I come back to my equation, the change in total cost was $30,000, and the change in quantity was 10 that generated that change in 30, giving me a marginal cost of 3,000. So each additional unit costs me 3,000 on average. You can see we're kind of averaging over this range. So if I said, well, what's the cost of the 13th unit? 3,000. Given this information, it's 3,000. What's the cost of the 17th unit? 3,000. What's the cost of the 20th unit? 3,000. So we're just kind of averaging over this interval what the cost was of those units. Now, notice that this 10 units had a different set of costs. And that's one of the key economic principles of the law of diminishing marginal product gives us this result, is that these 10 units, even though, what are we producing, by the way? What are these units? Give me something, anything, what first thing that comes to mind? What? Pens. So these pens, the first set of 10 pens are absolutely identical to these set of pens, right? If I put a 10 pack in front of you, these 10 pens are identical to these 10 pens. But yet, here's the economics of it, is that these first 10 pens cost me 60 grand. The first 10 pens cost me 60 grand. Because, as somebody pointed out, that total cost includes also the fixed cost. And the more pens I generate, what happens to my average fixed cost? Does it go up or down? Down. Right? So my average fixed cost goes down even if my marginal cost is going up. All right, so since you guys brought it up, let's look at what, and actually we saw this a little bit last time. I can't remember if it was what version of it, but the cost curve relationship looks like this. If we have, let me start with the fixed cost. So the fixed cost we said is 100,000, right? And we know that if I just produce one unit, the average fixed cost of that one unit is 100,000. What's the average fixed cost of 2 units? 50,000. It drops dramatically, right? So if we go down here, we're like here. So for 2 units, my average fixed cost has dropped substantially, just off 2. And then if we go to 3, we're down to 33,000, right? And so you can see what we start to map out is a average fixed cost that can drop off very dramatically and head towards infinity. It's still going to be a positive at some amount, but it's going to get real close to the horizontal axis. And that is the average fixed cost curve, putting our graphing goggles on. Here's our schedule goggles driving that result, although we didn't have fixed cost as a column. All right. So then some other basic graphs. And I like to put it on a separate one once we get that. So if we were to graph total fixed cost, bear in mind it would be a horizontal line that looked like this. So total fixed costs stay the same no matter how much we produce. Right? So it's a horizontal line. And then average fixed cost falls. We know that this is our equation for total cost, though. It's a variable cost and fixed cost together. And so the next thing I want to look at is what does the, maybe I'll draw it down here just to be kind of close to this. What does the total cost curve look like? The most, let me just draw it, and then you guys, and then we can talk about it. Brendan, I don't know if you might need to switch if that's bothering you. You can feel free to get up and move on if you need to. So average total cost is kind of bowl-shaped. And then I like you to put a big fat dot at the minimum point of that bowl. That kind of turns out to be a key point because it's where the average total costs are minimized, right? At this particular quantity, whatever this quantity is, the average total cost is at the minimum, right there. So if our objective is to minimize average costs, which it's not, by the way, what is our objective in business? What are we trying to do? Marginal costs? Profit, I like the word profit. Shareholder wealth, so maximize profit. Now that's got 2 sides of the equation, so I don't want to distance myself too much from that profit equation. Profits are equal to what? total revenue, money in the cash register at the end of the day of our lemonade stand, right? The number of dollar bills in there, price times quantity, minus total cost. Good. Might look at an interesting spot like, well, this is where we minimize costs. Remember, that's not the objective. That's not the objective of the game. We're trying to maximize profits, which is a combination of maximizing revenues and minimizing costs. And that point does not necessarily going to be at that point. That's not necessarily the right point. It just happens to be where average total cost is minimized. Okay, questions on this so far? All right, average variable cost. Watch me draw this, and then we can talk about it again. So it's also bowl-shaped, and it's going to bottom out before that point, and then it's going to narrow itself and look something like this, so that the vertical distance gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you head this direction, and it's fat here. And then you can draw its minimum point wherever that turned out to be.
Sorry, what is that line? The average?
Average variable cost. Yep, average variable cost. So now these two big fat points here represent the minimum points of the averages. And that is the general picture of average variable cost and average total. Why does it look that way? I do general case. Why does that have to related to this little equation up here?
What's the little equation up there?
Total cost equals total variable cost plus total fixed. When you switch the screen, are you able to see that, Keith, if you switch the screen to the board?
I just have the.
Oh, you just got the.
Screen that is cost flyby. That's the one that's constant.
Oh. That's a good question. Yeah. Are you able to see if you can select on your view? Well, let me see. I can do it here because I can pretend I'm you.
So when you go to the board, it doesn't switch screens on
Hide
my side.
thumbnail video. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Let me see if kind of curious if I can pick this or not. Switch to active speaker.
It won't let me do it either. It's just stuck on the blue.
Okay, so what I have to do is stop the share then, which is fine. I can do that if I start going. Oh, I got to stop the share on this one. All right, let me switch that for you guys, because yeah, obviously, so if I start going off like that and forget about that, now you guys can do it, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so feel free to remind me if I start going to the board like this to switch that, okay? Now you can see it okay, Keith?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so back to my question here. What's the connection? Anybody? I might have my extra credit pen out. Here it is. It's this green one that was given to me. Who wants to take a stab? Oh, you need power? Okay. Yeah, there's one on the floor. And actually, hey, I got this, Shanita. I did bring this also. If you guys wanted to plug that in on your thing over there, and then you could multi-port out of there. Okay, my extra credit pen's going to go to waste. All right, let me do a little blow up for you here. So total cost equals total variable cost plus total fixed cost. Now, Erica, how did we find average total cost? You got it right before, so that's why I'm picking on you.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Average total cost. What was the formula for that?
We divided units the quantity.
We took $30,000 divided by the quantity, right?
Yeah.
So we did this. Now, what do we have to do when we've got our equation goggles on? If we do something to one side of the equation, what do we got to do to the other? Same thing. So I can divide this whole thing by Q, or let me skip one step and divide this by Q and divide this by Q. What's this? Average variable cost. Good. What's this? Average fixed cost. Good. And what's this? Average total cost. And now we just learned that the sum of the averages is also equal to average total. So this is something to memorize right here. There's like 6 different equations going on with this. Averages equals the total. And then we've got all the individual ones. Average total cost is that formula, average variable cost is that formula, average fixed cost is that formula. So we got like 6 different things going on at one time, all in this little expression. And this then gives us the if my company produces 1,756, the average total cost is given by going up to the average total cost curve, hang a left, read off that number. The average total cost of producing 1,756 units at my business is $27, let's just say. The average variable cost of producing 1,756 units is you go up to the average variable cost and hang a left, and we learn that the average variable cost per unit is $24. Which means, what's the average fixed cost per unit? $3. Good. The difference between the two. So we've got the difference between the two of $3 because of this formula, and that's why these two had to be shrinking with the vertical distance. We don't have to draw this curve here because it's extra information. We've already got all that information here. So we usually just draw this picture when we want to capture the cost curves, because it would be a little bit repetitive to put that in here, because this vertical height is the average fixed cost, is that vertical height of $3. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. So 500 puts me, let's say, here. Now, the average total cost of producing 500 units is less. Is that okay with you? Does that seem right or not, that it would change on you? Maybe it changed to $25.50. Does that make sense that our average variable cost would change like that? Is it possible for it to change? Yeah, sure it is, right? So our cost, just by virtue of this, the variable cost of ramping up production from 10 units to 20 units was $30,000. The variable cost associated with ramping things up from 0 units to 10 units was $60,000. So variable costs change depending on where we're at in the production spectrum. So that can change. So at 500 units, we'd have $25.50. The average that was the average total cost would be $25.50. The average variable cost would be down here. The difference would be the average fixed. And so from this graph, we're just moving from 1756 down to something a lot fatter, because we're not we're not averaging those fixed costs over as many units.
I'm sorry, I'm so confused. So, because I'm seeing that the average fixed cost is the space in between those, that you drew over there.
Yes.
So that space gets bigger.
It's the vertical space, so watch this. Here's the vertical space here.
So is that still $3?
Here's the vertical space here. Now watch this. Now if I take that and transplant it to this graph, 1756 is here. That vertical space is that. 500 is here. That vertical space is that. I could draw this graph here, but it's just that vertical space. So that vertical space is fatter here and then smaller here. Does that help? Okay, what part aren't you getting?
Well,
Give me another verbalization of.
never mind. I figured it out.
You got it?
Because it's average, not total.
It's average, not total. That's right. Okay, so you were kind of hung up on this.
I was thinking if the fixed cost is $3, the fixed cost is $3.
That's right, and it does stay the same, but the fixed cost is $100,000, and the average fixed cost is falling. Good. Okay. Other questions on that? So the granddaddy of them, we're missing. We're missing the one that's probably the most relevant for economics class is what? The marginal cost. The marginal cost is not there. So the marginal cost is the one that we pay attention to specifically in economics class. And let me just draw it on here and then we'll talk about it. I'll put it in red, blue, red, red. So I had you draw these big fat dots for a reason. The marginal cost curve cuts through those minimum points and looks like that. It can be kind of J-shaped at the beginning, and then it cuts through the minimum points of the averages. And to me, that one's best illustrated with grades. Do you remember your undergraduate career when you were a sophomore and you were studying and you had a 3.0 going and you were pretty happy with that? And then your junior year, you started drinking a little and you started partying and socializing, and you got a 2.5 that semester. What happened to your overall GPA? Did it drop from 3.0 to 2.5? No. It dropped a little bit, right? Because that was your marginal grades that semester was just a 2.5, but you had already accumulated a lot of credit hours. So your average was falling. Your cumulative average was falling when your semester grade was below it. So your semester grade laid below it, and so your average was falling. Let's say it fell to 2.9. So that semester, mom and dad cracked the whip a little bit. They've been funding things, and so you're like, okay, I'm going to do well. I really want to. What happened to your GPA? Nothing, because it fell to a 2.9. You got a 2.9, so nothing happened. That's this point right here. So when the marginal cost, the cost of an additional unit, is equal to the average cost that you're already producing over all the units, then nothing happens to that average. Now you really get into gear, you're heading into the senior year, you bust your butt and you get a 4.0 that semester. Does your overall GPA go up to a 4.0? No, it goes up a little bit again, right? So maybe you get up to a 3.1 or something, but the point is that when your marginal grades are above your average starts to turn up. And so that's the relationship going on here with the units of production. The cost of an additional hamburger or whatever, of pens, whatever we're producing, if the cost of an additional pen is higher than the average cost of the previous pens produced, it's going to start to pull the average cost up. Okay? Questions on that? So that formula again, I'll just rewrite it. You guys have it down already, but the granddaddy here is marginal cost is equal to the change in total cost over the change in quantity. I got one more slippery thing to throw on you. Let's look at this equation. Look at how close this is to this. Right? We got total cost, we got quantity. The only difference is this little triangle. So let's blow that out. Total change in total cost is equal to the change in total variable cost over the change in quantity plus the change in total fixed cost over the change in quantity. What can you tell me about this expression? What can you tell me about that? Might be a good one for our previous comments earlier. Or maybe we could go to Lizzie and see if what she picked up with this whole relationship. What was true about fixed costs when quantities change? What happens to fixed costs? How much do they change by?
Total fixed cost is the same, average fixed cost.
So as we change quantity, what happens to our what's the change in total fixed cost? Nothing. So that's 0. 0 divided by some number equals 0. We've got another formula. We can look at marginal cost as the change in total variable cost, because that's the only thing that's changing anyway, right? So we've got kind of two ways to look at it. Marginal cost is the change in total cost from a change in quantity, or it's the change in total variable cost, because that's the only thing that could change anyway. So we've got kind of two ways to look at variable cost and its relationship to marginal cost. All right. Questions there? Let's see, what are we on? Slide number 1? All right, good. The other thing we had on the screen, since we're kind of this far along with our thought process on marginal cost, was marginal revenue. What was marginal revenue? The revenue of selling an additional unit. Good. So you kind of go back to that additional unit thing. So here, profit is what we care about. And so ultimately, when we think about the profit equation, we're going to be looking at both marginal revenues and marginal cost. So as I add more units, my cost goes up because variable cost goes up. So the cost is going to go up. So sometimes the question is going to come down to, well, how much can I sell that unit for? What is the incremental amount of revenue for it? And so as long as we're at it, this seems like as good a spot as any to put down the marginal revenue formula, which is the change in total revenue from a change in quantity. Basically the same thing we just went through for total or for marginal cost, but now applying that to revenue. All right. Good? Good for now? All right, let me go back to, let's see if we can apply some of these concepts here. Let me go back to sharing the screen. Oops, I'm on the wrong stop share. Gotta remember what computer to come to. Share screen. Oops, there we go. All right, so there's our definitions that we had before. And here's some of our decisions. So, should you change the level of advertising? Let me stop on that one. What do we think about here in terms of marginal revenue and marginal cost? Should you change the level of advertising?
It'll be dependent on like your customer acquisition cost, or like people think about.
Okay.
that.
So, what's on the cost side?
Cost side would be whatever you advertise, the cost of a television commercial.
Okay, television cost. Okay, good. So we got some sort of cost going on there. And then how do we think about the revenue side?
It's that cost divided by the additional number of customers you receive.
Okay, the additional number of customers. And that's the key thing that's very hard to do. I've tried to do it with some businesses that I've had, and I've tried my best to pin down sales agents and to kind of analyze it. And at the end of the day, it's just tough. You know, why did those people come? Because they heard the radio spot that you had or not, right? I mean, it's very difficult to know why you had an uptick in business. Can we attribute 100% of the extra 100 people that came into the door that night to that, or was there a football game going on and there just was an increase in business? You know, it's just hard to know where that is. But that's the type of things that we need to be thinking about as we make that decision. Regardless of whether we know it well or not, we should be thinking about that, because that'll sometimes make the no-brainer decisions easy, like, oh, well, this advertising is going to cost you $1,000. And then you run a restaurant and you're like, okay, so in order to justify the $1,000, and if my average plate cost is $10, how many people do I need to bring into the restaurant just to break even on the $1,000 splurge on advertising? Who's got that math in their head? I know I'm pushing you guys tonight. $10 a plate on average is our restaurant plate cost. $1,000 worth of advertising. How many people do I got to bring in the door? 100 extra people just to break even. Not to make extra money, but just to cover the cost, the incremental cost of that $1,000 advertising. I have to be thinking to myself, I got to bring in an extra 100 people that day. Now, depending on what type of business you're running, that might be, oh, well, yeah, 100 people, that's not bad. We'll probably do that. Or if you're a little mom and pop restaurant that has a 50-seat place, you're like, there's no way we're going to get 100 people more. You know, I've been doing this for 5 years. You know, and so it helps you to make the decision when the advertising rep is sitting right in front of you. You can do that type of calculation and explain to the rep, you need to be bringing me in 100 people to make this even come close to making sense. Right? So you start to learn how to analyze those messages by thinking about things at the margin. All right, should you increase the quality of service? Quality of service. What would go into that decision? Should you increase the quality of service?
I need to invest more time in training.
Okay, so different sorts of costs associated with training, right? So again, we kind of want to brainstorm what's it going to take to increase quality. And so part of that might be service. Part of that might be the quality of meat that we have in our hamburger, right? So maybe there's some special seasoning or special sauce that has some additional cost, or we're getting Kobe beef or something, and we got to figure out whether that's worth the extra cost of doing that. So should you increase the quality of service? You kind of run through the same thought process, right? What are the extra costs of that, providing that quality, and am I going to get it on the back end in terms of revenue? All right, is your staff big enough or too big? Staffing decision with employees. What goes into that? How much you pay them, okay?
How many customers are coming through the door on average?
Okay, good. So customer flow.
Productivity, if there's 3 of us, it's easier to do the job.
Okay, as opposed to 2 of us. Okay, so the productivity of your workers on how productive they are, good.
How much you're making relative to how much you're spending on wages.
Okay, and so how would you do the making? What are some things that would be how much you're making? What are some things you need to be careful on if you're going to cut your staff, like right now at Ottawa, we had to cut some staff that I know a lot of you are probably aware of. So, you know, what are some things that need to be thought about at the time you're cutting staff? Consequences like what?
Well, quality of service. If you cut your staff, it could decrease your quality of service just within like productivity and whatnot.
Okay, good. So quality of service is playing into that, right? So are we going to be able to serve our students at the same level we were before with less people? I'd say probably not. It just doesn't work that way if we start thinking about a production process. You know, that's probably why we had. Now the argument to that would be were we carrying a bunch of excess before? Were we, you know, did we have a little excess that we needed to trim, but we didn't because times were good, and so we just said, oh, I don't really want to fire people because things are good and we're making some money, so who cares, right? That's kind of the mentality of how we go with hiring and firing. We usually don't come to the point of letting people go until we really kind of have to let it go. But at the same time, now we have to be at least cognizant that the level of service, are we going to pay on that end? What's going to happen long term if people have bad experiences because there's not enough staff to facilitate them? Are they going to come back next year? What's going to happen to retention rates? Are we going to be able to attract new students? You know, all that kind of stuff needs to be factored in. I don't have all the answers. I'm just telling you those are the issues that you need to think about as we think about the production process of whatever our business is. All right, how many parking spaces should you lease? Parking is another issue that I heard one of the students here, that we have a new parking fee at Ottawa that caught a grumble.
I know.
So yeah, a little fee base. So how many parking spaces do we need to have? Well, you need to think about the same things we've been talking about with the customers. If we're running a restaurant, we need to have a number of spaces that people feel comfortable to come and go. Maybe it's true here in Kansas, but not true in Manhattan, where everybody has the mentality of, well, you just got to find a place to park. I don't know where it's going to be, but there's no parking for anyone. So again, it depends on the kind of the space and context of where you're analyzing the decision. You don't want to generalize too much because things can be very specific. All right, questions or comments there? So, marginal analysis, time in and time out. This is right up there with the top principles of economics. And again, I think it's so easy that people are like, well, duh, I do that anyway. Well, you might, but you don't usually apply it to every decision. So when I thought about whether I should brush my teeth this morning, right, this is the way an economist thinks. I think about the marginal benefits and the marginal costs, you know. Is this today going to cause tooth decay if I don't brush my teeth this morning?
You take in the dental insurance.
Dental insurance, you gotta bring that into account. All these things. Once you start to think this way, all these variables with every decision comes into play. Well, what's it costing me? Well, when do we decide to skip brushing our teeth? When have you guys skipped brushing your teeth? Even though you're a normal teeth, I'll just assume that you're late for work, you got to get to work, right? All of a sudden, brushing your teeth becomes pretty costly when you're going to be late for the 5th time with your boss and you're going to get canned, right? You're running out the door, you're not brushing your teeth because the cost's too high, right? So every day we're making these types of decisions of marginal revenue or marginal benefit more generically, but in the context of a business, we're usually talking about money coming in with profit maximization. But at a personal level, we're thinking about the marginal benefit. What's the marginal benefit? What's the marginal cost? What I do today may not be what I do tomorrow because values are subjective and this might change. But if the benefits exceed the cost, do it. If not, don't. That is the economic way of thinking, time and time again, with every single decision. And all the years that I spent with business, people don't get that in general. They will sit there and think, well, what about the rent for the building? Who cares about the rent for the building on whether you should brush your teeth or whether the cost, maybe it's the cost of dental insurance if you're thinking about your insurance. You paid the $25 a month, It's still going to be $25 a month whether you brush your teeth this morning or not. There's no change in additional cost. You have an incremental amount of exposure to tooth decay, but probably if you brush your teeth tonight or tomorrow, there's going to be a negligible effect, right? So expected benefit, if we generalize this to thinking about uncertainty, we're probably looking at expected marginal benefits and expected marginal cost. Okay, questions or comments there? Let's take a break. Break time.